We live in a world where connection is everything. It's what we crave, what we long for, and often what we're most afraid of losing. And yet, sometimes, despite this deep desire for connection, we find ourselves on opposite sides of the silence, unsure of why those we care about or those we wish would reach out don't do so. It's confusing, painful, and leaves us wondering, what did I do wrong? But what if we step back and consider a different perspective? What if we shift our focus from the absence of communication to the complexity of the human experience? In the world of human relationships, vulnerability is often seen as a weakness. We're taught to protect ourselves, to guard our hearts, to stay strong and resilient in the face of challenges. But the truth is, vulnerability is not a weakness. It's the source of strength and the essential ingredient for genuine connection. When we talk about vulnerability, we often think of it as exposing ourselves emotionally or revealing our deepest fears and insecurities. In some cases, that is part of it. But vulnerability goes beyond just opening up about our pain or our scars. It is about showing up as our true, unguarded selves in all our complexity and imperfection. It's in those moments of true vulnerability when we let down our walls and stop pretending to have it all together that we experience the most profound connections with others. Why? Because when we are vulnerable, we allow others to see us for who we truly are, not the version we've carefully curated for public consumption. This rawness, this willingness to share our authentic selves is what draws people to us. Think about it for a moment. When you meet someone who is completely themselves, who isn't trying to be perfect or hide their flaws, don't you feel more connected to them? Don't you feel like you can trust them because they're not pretending to be something they're not? That's the magic of vulnerability. It invites trust, and trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. However, vulnerability doesn't just benefit the person who is being open. It also creates an invitation for others to do the same. When we show our vulnerability, we give others permission to do the same. It creates a safe space where both parties can let their guards down and be real with each other. This is the kind of connection we long for, one that is deep, honest, and without pretense. It's important to recognize, though, that vulnerability comes with its risks. When we open ourselves up to others, we make ourselves susceptible to hurt, rejection, and disappointment. But that is the paradox of vulnerability. It is only by embracing the possibility of being hurt that we open ourselves to the possibility of truly connecting with others. Without risk, there is no reward. Without vulnerability, there is no real intimacy. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, vulnerability creates the space for empathy. It allows us to connect not just with the perfect versions of each other that we show to the world, but with the messy, flawed, and human parts of ourselves that we often try to hide. And when we see that vulnerability reflected back in others, we are reminded that we are not alone in our struggles. And we are all navigating this human experience together. And it is through vulnerability that we find our shared humanity. But vulnerability is not just about sharing our struggles or fears. It's also about sharing our joy, our hopes, and our dreams. It's about being willing to celebrate the moments that make us feel alive and proud without fear of judgment. We often think of vulnerability as something that exposes our pain, but it can also be a powerful expression of our joy, love, and aspirations. By being vulnerable, we not only allow others to comfort us in our lowest points, but we also invite them to celebrate with us in our highest moments. To truly embrace vulnerability, we must confront our fears of rejection and judgment. It's a challenge to let go of the armor we've spent so much time building up. But it is through this process of letting go that we discover the beauty of human connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give others the opportunity to see us, to accept us, and to love us as we are, imperfect, raw, and wonderfully human. The key to connection is not about waiting for the perfect moment or the right circumstances. It's about being willing to show up imperfect and unsure and say, "This is me. I am enough, even in my vulnerability." Only when we do this can we invite others to truly connect with us and we with them. Because ultimately, vulnerability isn't just about exposing our weaknesses or fears. It's about embracing our authentic selves in all their fullness. And when we do that, we give ourselves and others the chance to experience a level of connection that is far deeper, more meaningful, and more beautiful than anything that can be built on pretense or perfection. When we find ourselves in situations where communication is absent, whether it's from a friend, a partner, or someone we care about, it's natural to jump to conclusions. We might wonder, why aren't they reaching out? What did I do wrong? The silence becomes deafening, and our minds can easily begin to create stories of rejection, of being unimportant, or of not being worthy of their time or attention. But what if that silence is not a reflection of our value or the quality of the relationship at all? What if instead it is a sign of internal struggles, of battles they are facing within themselves? People do not always communicate openly, not because they don't care, but because they may be grappling with their own complex emotions. These internal struggles could come from a range of sources: fear, anxiety, past trauma, or simply being overwhelmed by the weight of their own lives. Silence in this context is not a statement about you or the relationship, but a symptom of something much deeper that they are dealing with internally. So, in the realm of vulnerability, many people carry the weight of self-doubt and insecurity. They might be afraid to reach out because they're uncertain of how to express their feelings, or they might fear being vulnerable themselves. For some, the silence is a form of self-protection. It's easier to retreat, to avoid the potential for pain or discomfort, than to risk facing the emotional vulnerability that comes with opening up to someone else. We often forget that people carry their own invisible burdens. They may be navigating mental health challenges such as depression or anxiety, which can make it incredibly difficult to initiate contact, even with those they care about. For others, past experiences of rejection or abandonment might make them hesitant to reach out even when they desperately want to. These internal struggles can lead to avoidance, even though their hearts may long for connection. In many cases, silence can be an expression of confusion or uncertainty. The person might be unsure about their own feelings or unsure of what they want or need from the relationship. When we are unclear about our own emotions, it becomes challenging to communicate with others in a meaningful way. This doesn't reflect anything wrong with the relationship or the connection we share. It simply means that they are working through something within themselves and haven't yet found the clarity or courage to express it. It's also important to recognize that people have different coping mechanisms. Some respond to emotional stress by withdrawing and shutting down, while others might seek comfort in talking things through. Silence, in this case, is simply a reflection of their way of processing and dealing with internal conflict. It doesn't mean that they don't care or that they are rejecting you. It just means they are in a place where they are unable to reach out, even though they may desire to do so. We should also remember that silence can sometimes be a sign of self-protection, not just for the other person, but for the relationship itself. They might fear that opening up could lead to misunderstanding, conflict, or hurt. So in their mind, staying silent might seem like the safer route, even though it is ultimately an unhealthy response. It's a mechanism to shield both themselves and the relationship from what they perceive could be painful emotions or outcomes. When we feel hurt by someone's silence, it's essential to remind ourselves that their struggle is not a reflection of our worth. We are not defined by their inability or unwillingness to reach out. Silence is not rejection. It is often the manifestation of internal pain, fear, or confusion. It's the voice of someone who is struggling to reconcile their emotions and may not yet have the clarity or vulnerability to share what they're going through. What this means for us as the ones who might be waiting for that communication is that we have an opportunity to practice patience and empathy. Instead of assuming that the silence is a rejection of us, we can choose to understand that it reflects a personal struggle that the other person may not know how to navigate. We can hold space for them without taking their silence personally, offering them the compassion to work through whatever it is they are facing. Moreover, when we understand that silence may come from internal struggles rather than rejection, we free ourselves from the trap of negative self-talk and the hurt that comes with feeling undeserving of communication. We are reminded that our value isn't contingent on the presence or absence of others' actions. We are worthy of love, connection, and respect, regardless of someone else's struggles or inability to reach out. Finally, silence does not have to be permanent. It is often a phase, a space that one might need in order to heal or gain clarity. With time and with an openness to understanding, the silence can eventually give way to communication and connection. But even in that space, we must remember that it's not about us. It's about the internal journey that someone is taking. Their silence is not an indictment of our worth, but a reflection of their struggle to find their own voice. In life, many of us build armor, conscious or unconscious, around our hearts to protect ourselves from the pain and vulnerability that come with being truly seen. This armor, while it may offer temporary relief from emotional hurt, ultimately serves as a barrier to authentic connection and personal growth. It hides the parts of ourselves that we fear others won't accept or understand. But the irony is, in protecting ourselves from potential pain, we also shield ourselves from the deep connections and profound love that are born from true vulnerability. Armor takes many forms. It can manifest as emotional walls where we refuse to show our true feelings or admit when we're struggling. It can show up as perfectionism, where we present an idealized version of ourselves, hoping that if we appear flawless, no one will notice our flaws or vulnerabilities. It can appear as self-sufficiency, where we convince ourselves that we don't need anyone else because relying on others would make us weak. For some, the armor may be an outward persona of confidence or control, masking a deep sense of insecurity or fear. The truth is, this armor is often a response to past wounds. Many of us have experienced rejection, betrayal, or hurt in some form, and as a result, we instinctively learn to protect ourselves from being hurt again. We may have been told that we weren't good enough or that showing our emotions was a sign of weakness. So we put on layers of armor to ensure that we never experience that kind of pain again. We build these defenses in an attempt to feel safe, to feel in control of our lives and relationships. However, while our armor may protect us from pain in the short term, it comes with a cost. The more we hide behind our protective layers, the less others can truly know us. We may appear strong, independent, or self-sufficient on the outside, but on the inside, we may feel isolated, lonely, and misunderstood. Our true selves, the parts of us that are imperfect, raw, and vulnerable, remain hidden from the world, and as a result, we miss out on the intimacy and connection that come from being seen for who we truly are. Armor also distorts how we see ourselves. When we wear our protective layers for too long, we begin to believe that the armor is who we really are. We forget that it's only a facade, a shield we've created to protect our vulnerable hearts. We start to identify with the version of ourselves that is constantly on guard and ready for battle, but we lose touch with the essence of who we truly are beneath that armor. This can lead to feelings of disconnection and confusion about our identity, as we no longer know how to separate the real us from the armor we've built. Other challenge with armor is that it creates distance between us and others. Genuine connection thrives on mutual vulnerability, the willingness to show up imperfect and unguarded and allow others to do the same. When we wear armor, we unintentionally create a barrier that makes it difficult for others to connect with us on a deeper level. We may receive compliments or praise for our accomplishments, but the real us remains hidden. We may even wonder why our relationships feel surface level or unsatisfying. The truth is, it's hard for anyone to connect with us if we're not willing to let them see our true selves. In relationships, this armor can manifest as emotional unavailability. We may want to get close to others, but we're afraid of getting hurt, so we keep our hearts locked away. We may avoid difficult conversations or avoid showing our true emotions because we fear that vulnerability will lead to rejection or disappointment. We become experts at deflecting, at making ourselves appear fine when we're anything but. We may even convince ourselves that being emotionally distant is a form of self-preservation. But the cost is high. We lose the chance to create deep, meaningful relationships with those who could truly see and understand us. What happens when we begin to lower our armor and let others in? We create the possibility for connection that is rooted in authenticity and mutual understanding. By letting down our guard, we invite others to see us as we are, with all of our imperfections, flaws, and fears. And when others do the same, we create a space where trust and intimacy can flourish. This doesn't mean that we're completely unguarded all the time. Vulnerability requires discernment and trust. But when we allow ourselves to be seen, not just for our strengths, but for our struggles as well, we invite others to do the same. And it is in these moments of true vulnerability that we experience the richest connections and the deepest growth. The act of shedding our armor is a process, one that takes time, patience, and self-compassion. It's about acknowledging that we are worthy of love and connection just as we are, without the need for perfection or self-protection. It's about letting go of the fear that being vulnerable will lead to rejection or judgment, and embracing the belief that in our authenticity, we are enough. As we begin to shed our armor, we might feel exposed, and that's okay. The truth is, while vulnerability can feel uncomfortable at first, it is also liberating. It allows us to live more fully, to embrace who we are in all our humanity, and to create relationships that are rooted in truth, trust, and empathy. By letting go of the armor, we free ourselves to experience the world and others in a deeper, more meaningful way. We allow ourselves the opportunity to truly connect, to be seen, heard, and loved for who we truly are. And that ultimately is what makes life richer and more fulfilling, the ability to connect with others on a genuine, authentic level. In a world that is constantly bombarded by external feedback, whether it comes from social media, relationships, or societal standards, it's easy to fall into the trap of measuring our value based on what others think of us. We seek approval, we chase recognition, and we look for signs that we're doing the right things, hoping that external validation will affirm our worth and make us feel seen, accepted, and loved. But the reality is that our worth is not something that can be dictated by others. It is not a commodity that can be earned or lost based on the praise or criticism of the world around us. Our value is intrinsic. It's a fundamental part of who we are as human beings. Regardless of what we accomplish, how others perceive us, or whether we fit into society's narrow definitions of success. We are taught from a young age that success, achievement, and popularity are the metrics by which our worth is determined. We grow up internalizing the idea that if we do well in school, land the perfect job, or maintain a flawless appearance, we will be worthy of love and respect. We equate our worth with how much recognition we receive from others, how many likes we get on social media, or how others view our achievements. However, this external validation is fleeting and unreliable. The compliments, praise, and accolades we receive from others can be uplifting, but they are not permanent. In fact, they can often leave us feeling empty, as if something is still missing. When we base our worth solely on external validation, we are constantly at the mercy of other people's opinions and judgments. And the reality is that these opinions are subjective, ever-changing, and sometimes even biased. What happens when the praise stops coming, or when the recognition is delayed, or we fail to meet someone's expectations? If our worth is tied to external factors, we can find ourselves in a constant state of self-doubt and insecurity, questioning our value when we don't receive the affirmation we expect. This dependence on external validation can also lead to a cycle of comparison, where we constantly measure ourselves against others and feel inadequate when we perceive ourselves to be falling behind. But here's the truth. Your worth does not fluctuate based on someone else's opinion of you. You are not less worthy when you receive criticism, and you are not more worthy when you are praised. True self-worth comes from within, from the recognition that you are enough just as you are. It's about understanding that you are worthy of love, respect, and kindness, not because of your accomplishments, your appearance, or how others perceive you, but because of who you are at your core. This is not to say that external validation doesn't have its place in our lives. Feedback and support from others can be meaningful and motivating, but they should never be the sole determinant of our worth. It's essential to recognize that we can appreciate external validation without allowing it to define us. When we find validation solely from within, we free ourselves from the chains of comparison and the endless cycle of seeking approval. The key to building self-worth is developing a deep sense of self-acceptance and self-compassion. It's about recognizing that you are worthy of love and respect simply because you exist. Your value does not depend on how much you do or what you achieve. It is inherent in your humanity. You are enough as you are right now in this moment. One of the most powerful ways to strengthen our self-worth is to practice self-compassion. This means being gentle with ourselves when we make mistakes, recognizing that imperfections are a natural part of being human, and treating ourselves with the same kindness and care that we would extend to a loved one. When we practice self-compassion, we begin to internalize the belief that we are worthy of love, not because we're perfect, but because we're human and deserving of grace and understanding. Moreover, when we base our worth on internal validation, we stop looking outside of ourselves for approval. Instead, we start measuring our success and self-worth against our own values, goals, and passions. We begin to understand that our life is ours to define and that we are not beholden to others' standards or opinions. When we start living for ourselves, we no longer need to seek constant validation because we are aligned with our own truth. This shift in perspective also enables us to be more resilient in the face of challenges. When we understand that our worth is not contingent on external factors, we become less vulnerable to the sting of criticism or rejection. We learn that failure is not a reflection of our value, but simply a part of the growth process. And success doesn't define our worth. It is just a result of our efforts and actions, not a measure of our intrinsic value. It's essential to recognize that true confidence comes from knowing that you are worthy regardless of what happens around you. Confidence is not about the absence of doubt or fear. It's about trusting yourself and knowing that even when you fall short of your own expectations or the expectations of others, you are still deserving of love, respect, and success. When we stop seeking validation from the outside world, we make space for the kind of growth and fulfillment that comes from being authentic and true to ourselves. We find freedom in knowing that we don't need to constantly prove our worth to anyone because we already know that we are enough. We can let go of the need for external approval and instead create a life that is guided by our own values and desires, not the fleeting opinions of others. In essence, your worth is not tied to external achievements, praise, or judgments. It is rooted in the very essence of who you are. You are worthy because you exist and because you bring something unique and valuable to the world simply by being yourself. Embrace that truth and let it be the foundation upon which you build a life of authenticity, fulfillment, and self-love. This expanded version delves into how seeking external validation can be limiting and emphasizes the importance of internal self-worth, self-compassion, and resilience. It encourages moving beyond society's measures of success and embracing intrinsic value. Let me know if you'd like me to add anything else. In a world that often feels unpredictable and at times harsh, the act of staying open emotionally, mentally, and spiritually can be incredibly daunting. It requires vulnerability, a willingness to embrace uncertainty, and the courage to remain receptive to what life brings, even when the outcomes are unknown. For many of us, the instinct to close ourselves off can feel much safer and more controllable. After all, by protecting our hearts and minds, we shield ourselves from potential pain, disappointment, and rejection. Yet staying open in the face of fear and uncertainty is one of the bravest acts we can engage in. Staying open means allowing ourselves to remain receptive to the world and to people, even when we've experienced betrayal, hurt, or loss. It means not hardening our hearts after difficult experiences or becoming cynical in response to the challenges we faced. It is about allowing ourselves to continue to love, to hope, and to trust, even when we know that there's a possibility that we might be hurt again. But that willingness to stay open is not about naivety or ignorance. It's about embracing the inherent risks of life, understanding that while vulnerability can lead to pain, it is also the gateway to growth, healing, and deep connection. When we stay open, we invite new possibilities into our lives. We open ourselves to learning, to seeing the world in new ways, and to discovering parts of ourselves that we might not have known existed. It's easy to close off from experiences that seem too challenging or overwhelming, but by doing so, we limit our capacity to grow and evolve. Staying open means allowing ourselves to experience joy, beauty, and wonder, even when we are uncertain of what might come next. It means choosing to trust that despite the unpredictability of life, there is value and growth in remaining open to new experiences. But this act of openness requires courage. It means putting down our guard, accepting the possibility that we may encounter situations that challenge us, make us uncomfortable, or cause us emotional discomfort. It requires us to face the possibility of rejection, failure, and disappointment without letting it close us off from future opportunities. And yet, it is in these moments of openness that we discover our greatest strength, the strength to keep going, to keep believing, and to keep showing up for ourselves and others, even when it feels difficult or risky. When we stay open, we allow ourselves to connect deeply with others. Authentic connection is built on vulnerability and openness. If we close ourselves off out of fear of being judged or hurt, we miss out on the profound human connections that can transform our lives. Vulnerability in relationships requires us to remain open to the other person's experiences and emotions, even when they differ from our own. It means giving others the space to be themselves, and in return, being willing to let others see and understand us in our most genuine, raw form. Moreover, staying open doesn't just apply to our relationships with others, it applies to our relationship with ourselves. To be open to growth, we must be willing to face the parts of ourselves that we might try to hide or suppress. We must be willing to confront our fears, insecurities, and wounds in order to heal. When we close ourselves off, we block our ability to evolve, to learn from our mistakes, and to become better versions of ourselves. Staying open means embracing the idea that growth is not always linear, and that sometimes we must sit with discomfort in order to move forward. That staying open also means accepting the inherent uncertainty of life. Life does not always unfold according to plan, and it's easy to become disillusioned when things don't go the way we hoped or expected. But staying open to the unknown allows us to embrace life as it is, messy, unpredictable, and beautiful. It's about surrendering control and trusting that even though we can't predict the future, we can navigate the journey with grace, resilience, and trust in ourselves. Another dimension of staying open is the willingness to forgive both others and ourselves. Holding on to grudges or resentment only closes us off to healing and prevents us from moving forward. Forgiveness is an act of courage, as it requires us to release the hurt and pain that have kept us in a state of closure. When we forgive, we open ourselves up to the possibility of peace and emotional freedom. By choosing to forgive, we allow ourselves to move forward with an open heart, unburdened by past wrongs or mistakes. The courage to stay open also extends to the way we engage with change. Change is one of the most difficult aspects of life to embrace, yet it is the one constant. Whether it's a shift in our personal circumstances, a change in relationships, or unexpected life events, staying open to change requires resilience. Change often brings discomfort, and our instinct is often to resist it, to hold on to what feels safe and familiar. But when we remain open to change, we invite the possibility of transformation, both within ourselves and in our lives. We learn to adapt, to grow, and to see the opportunities hidden within life's challenges. When we stay open, we acknowledge that life is a series of unpredictable moments and experiences. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond. Staying open is an active choice to embrace life even when it feels daunting or uncertain. It's a commitment to remain hopeful, to stay vulnerable, and to continue trusting the process, no matter how hard it might seem. Ultimately, staying open is an act of self-trust. It's the courage to believe that even in the face of adversity, we have the strength to navigate whatever comes our way. By staying open, we allow ourselves to experience the richness of life in all its forms. Joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat, love and loss. And in doing so, we invite the possibility of profound connection, growth, and transformation. As we journey through life, we will inevitably face moments that challenge us, that test our resolve, and that make us want to retreat and close ourselves off from the world. But in those moments, remember this: staying open is not about being fearless or immune to pain. It's about having the courage to embrace both the light and the dark. It's about trusting ourselves enough to remain vulnerable even when the outcome is uncertain. By staying open, we allow ourselves to grow, to learn, and to experience the world in all its beauty and complexity. We open ourselves to deeper connections with others, to authentic love, and to the endless possibilities that life has to offer. And in the process, we come to understand that it's through our openness, our vulnerability, and our willingness to face the unknown that we unlock the greatest sources of strength and resilience within us. So I encourage you, no matter what challenges or uncertainties you may face in the future, choose to stay open. Stay open to love, to learning, to healing, and to growth. Stay open to the possibility that even in your vulnerability, you are whole, you are worthy, and you are enough. Because the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to the world is the courage to remain open, to show up as your authentic self, and to trust that in doing so, you will create a life rich with connection, meaning, and transformation. Bye, Gil.